Our businesses are very strong, indeed the strongest they've ever been. But regrettably, that's not what Wall Street is focusing on, and I doubt that's what you're focusing on. This inquiry will take a lot of time on the part of our accountants and lawyers and others, but it will finally put these issues to rest.
At the very moment Ken Lay was talking to employees, only a few blocks away, Enron's accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, had begun destroying its Enron files. On October 23rd, Andersen shredded more than 1 ton of paper.
Despite the rumors, despite the speculation, the company is doing well, both financially and operationally.
He was making all kinds of statements, reassuring employees, and not just employees, reassuring investors. We have no accounting irregularities. The company's in the best shape it's ever been in.
Now, from the standpoint of Enron stock, we're going to bring it back. We're going to bring it back. All right, we're down to questions. And I've got a few up here. I would like to know if you are on crack. If so, that would explain a lot. If not, you may want to start, because it's going to be a long time before we trust you again.
It certainly wasn't clear to anyone at Enron, much less anyone outside of Enron. It wasn't really clear what was going on or what was going to happen.
I know this is there's a lot of speculation about Andy's involvement. I and the board are also sure that Andy has operated in the most ethical and appropriate manner possible.
The next day, Andy Fastow was fired when the Enron board discovered that he had made more than $45 million from his LJN partnerships.
Question, Mr. Fastow, is how could you believe that your actions were in any way consistent with your fiduciary duties to Enron and its shareholders, or with common sense notions of corporate ethics and propriety? How do you answer, sir?
Mr. Chairman, on the advice of my counsel, I respectfully decline to answer the questions based on the protection afforded me under the United States Constitution.
Andy, in many ways, I think he was set up as the fall guy. All of the Enron executives were saying, there's your man, Andy Fastow. He's the crook. You know, he's the one that stole from Enron, stole from LJM. He's the one that cooked the books. Go after him.
I've thought about this and thought about this, and it couldn't have just been a few executives at Enron that made this happen. If you think of the banks involved, Chase, Morgan, Citibank, the billions in loans, Arthur Andersen. What about Vincent and Elkins, the lawyers that represented us? There had to have been complicity across the board because it was all too easy. All too easy.
The Enron collapse was an enormous tragedy. This is a company that had over 30,000 employees. And clearly in a company that size, you have a lot of senior officers that have a lot of authority in which you place enormous trust. Clearly in this case, there was at least one, Andy Fastow, that betrayed that trust. To the extent that I did not know what he was doing, that he obviously didn't share with me what he was doing, then indeed I cannot take responsibility for what he did.
I never heard him say I take responsibility for a thing. It sounded to me like the wonderful movie Chicago. I was reminded of the puppet strings and the dancers and the tap dancing and pointing at the gun. I mean, everybody's in step but Johnny.
I continue to grieve, as does my family, over the loss of the company. Linda and I saw our net worth reduced from several $100 million down to something less than $20 million on a net worth basis. And of course, as you said, about $1 million or less in liquidity.
I don't know whether I'd be rather be shot as a crook or as an idiot.
I believe the only venue for me is the ride of broken dreams.
Oh, you mean the Enron ride? Let's go.
Enron hit the national psyche. It hit it as sort of the time-tested lesson, and that is, if it looks too good to be true, sometimes it is.
We're all
coming!
It is my belief that Enron's failure was due to a classic run on the bank.
Don't look now, but there's something funny going on over there at the bank, George. I've never really seen one, but that's got all the earmarks of being a run.
On December 2nd, 2001, less than 4 months after Skilling's resignation, Enron declared bankruptcy.
I remember it was just a strange, kind of a surreal day. We learned around 9:30 about the bankruptcy and that we were all being let go. We all felt like we were on the Titanic and the last lifeboats had long gone and we were just now on the sinking ship. We had 30 minutes to leave the building, and at that point, it was no longer like being on the Titanic. It was kind of like being on the Lusitania. The torpedo had hit, and there's 20 minutes to get out.
There's a lot of disbelief. Very few of the rank and file people ever dreamed that Enron would actually go bankrupt. And then all of a sudden, it was like a ghost town. I can remember going into the old building on certain floors late in the afternoon or evening, and it was scary. There'd be like papers blowing around and nobody there, and it was very eerie.
Mr. Skilling, your opening statement was extremely compassionate to the employees. And I want to show you a tape, and I believe we have it ready to go. Listen to this.
Should we invest all of our 401k in Enron stock? Absolutely. Don't you guys agree?
Why is it that you had begun unloading your stock pretty heavily before that date, and yet led the employees to think they should keep buying stock?
Ms. Senator, I have been a major shareholder in Enron Corporation, and you can take the videotape to mean what you want it to mean. I was a supporter of Enron Corporation.
You know what happened to those people. They lost everything.
I feel terrible about what happened to the employees.
Well, at one time, things were really rosy for us, and we all had some really nice-looking 401ks and pensions, but it peaked, and then it just started going down and went lower and lower and lower. The peak, I had about $348,000, and I sold it all for $1,200 was what I got for it when it was done.
While Enron's stock was plummeting, the retirement accounts of Enron's rank-and-file workers were frozen.
We were frozen out of our accounts. It was right about $32, I believe. And over that time, from when it was frozen to when it opened up, I think it went down to 9, and we could not access it. And what came out later that was so bad was the fact that Ken Lay and Skilling and all the top people were moving their money then, but we couldn't.
The insiders had sold off $1 billion of their stock. Compare that to the lineman who worked for a state-old utility company for most of his life, put away money each month, and what's he have to show at the end of the day for his years of hard and decent labor? He gets a big goose egg. And Pi is out in Hawaii somewhere with $350 million in the bank. That's wrong.
There's still, to this city, a layer of anger and upset. I am still doing counseling 3 years later with some families. With some of those who are most reflective, it's gone to a deeper layer. And they are looking at the corporate culture itself in this country. You know, you can gain the whole world and all the trinkets and all the trophies of the world, the corner office and all the perks. And you really can lose your soul in the midst of this.
On January 25th, 2002, 7 weeks after the Enron bankruptcy, Cliff Baxter committed suicide.
with the media hounding him because he was mentioned in my memos, and the fact that he'd been sued civilly because he'd cashed in for about $30 million worth of stock, I guess it all came crashing down on it. I think Cliff's suicide note tells it all, you know, where there was once great pride, now there is none.
It's very hard for me to talk about Cliff. We were very close for many years. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man. But a lot of who Cliff was tied up in how he had succeeded at Enron. It is hard to look at your life's work and say, it's failed. But you have to take a long, cold look at yourself and say, who was I? Who did I become? And realize that you may have seen your shadow.
Andy Fastow pled guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud. He agreed to forfeit $23 million in assets. His sentence was reduced to 10 years in exchange for testifying against other Enron executives.
Why Enron? Why not WorldCom or Tyco or Global Crossings? Ultimately, in Enron, the fatal flaw was the sense that brains and wiliness could outthink the way that the system eventually will work.
In 2004, Jeff Skilling was indicted for insider trading and conspiracy to defraud investors. Pleading innocent, he paid his attorneys a retainer of $23 million to defend him.
Enron should not be viewed as an aberration, something that can't happen anywhere else, because it's all about the rationalization that you're not doing anything wrong. We've involved Arthur Andersen, we've involved the lawyers, the bankers know what we're doing. There's a sense, the diffusion of responsibility. Everyone was on the bandwagon. And it can happen again.
Enron's accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, was convicted of obstructing justice. With its reputation for honesty destroyed, America's oldest accounting firm fell along with Enron, and 29,000 people lost their jobs. Enron shareholders are suing Enron and its banks for $20 billion. Ken Lay was also indicted for conspiracy to commit fraud. His attorney maintains that no one has been hurt more by the Enron bankruptcy than Ken Lay.
With today's arrest of Ken Lay, the top echelon at Enron has now been called to account for their crimes.
Mr. Lay, you have anything to say, sir? A little later today,
Looking at Enron is like looking at the flip side of so much possibility, because like most things that end terribly, it didn't start out that way. It started with a lot of people who thought they were changing the world, and over time they became victims of their own hubris, victims of their own greed, and so it's like taking so much promise and possibility and looking at it in a mirror and seeing the flip side reflected back at you.
I think the larger lesson was what Enron asked of its employees, which was ask why. And, you know, I didn't ask myself why enough. I didn't ask managers why enough. I didn't ask my colleagues why enough.
You out of that ditch, you're out of luck. You're out of luck. Ship is sinking. My ship is sinking. The ship is sinking. There's a leak in the boiler room. The poor, the lame, the blind. Who are the ones that we kept in charge? Killers, thieves, and warriors. God's away, God's away, God's away on business, business. Digging up the tape with the shovel and the pick. It's a job, it's a job. Holy moon rising with the plague and the fun. Doing the mob, doing the mob. It's all over. It's all over. It's all over. And there's a leak in the boiler room. The poor, the lame, the blind. Who are the ones that we kept in charge? Killers, thieves, and lawyers. God's away, God's away, God's away on business, business.
But Enron's collapse was more than the shattering of one American success story.
It was a meteoric rise.
We will become the world leading company.
And a devastating collapse.
Enron is a corporate Chernobyl.
You have the entire system playing fast and loose.
It is not just Enron, it's an industry problem.
It is real damage to the country.
Why didn't anyone sound an alarm?
The watchdogs work for executives and Wall Street. They don't work to protect shareholders.
But once again,
correspondent Hedrick Smith investigates how greed and politics undercut America's financial watchdogs.
Is anyone protecting the public?
Tonight on Frontline, bigger than Enron.
Everything about Enron seemed larger than life. From its glittering Houston headquarters reaching to the skies, to its spectacular downfall. But Enron's collapse was more than the shattering of one American success story. It was a warning of a far wider malaise in the marketplace. Enron was the climax of an avalanche of American companies that cost investors as much as $200 billion by issuing deceptive financial reports. The roots of the Enron debacle stretched to Wall Street, where the accountants and other watchdogs were supposed to keep score on corporate America and make sure the market is honest. The trail leads also to Washington, where Congress weakened the protections and tied the hands of regulators, making it easier for aggressive companies like Enron to push the envelope.
Enron's collapse did not occur in a vacuum. Its backdrop is an obsessive zeal by too many American companies to project greater earnings from year to year. When I was at the SEC, I referred to this as a culture of gamesmanship. A gamesmanship that says it's okay to bend the rules, to tweak the numbers and let obvious and important discrepancies slide. A gamesmanship where companies bend to the desires and pressures of Wall Street analysts, rather than to the reality of the numbers.
But where were the watchdogs who were supposed to warn us when companies were playing fast and loose with their books? The stock analysts, lawyers, bankers, Securities and Exchange Commission. Above all, where were the accountants? By law, auditors have the official responsibility to ensure that corporate financial reports are honest. They're the first line of defense. But in the booming 90s, the big accounting firms like Arthur Andersen, which audited Enron's books, failed to protect us. And what happened at Arthur Andersen illustrates the wider story of how our watchdog system broke down.
Institutions are built on beliefs. Arthur Andersen was a man of unwavering beliefs that found marvelous new expressions over the years.
90 years ago, Arthur Andersen founded his firm on old-fashioned virtues. Accountants, he insisted, must think straight, talk straight, and dig beneath the numbers to get the truth.
His firm was built on these beliefs.
Over the decades, the firm built a global business on its reputation for rock-ribbed integrity.
True to our clients and true to our founder.
I've put 35 years of my life in Arthur Andersen. One of, if not the only reason I chose Andersen over the other firms was this idea that Andersen had a sense of integrity about it that was undeniable, at least to me as a young person. And that notion of integrity, of being keepers of the Holy Grail, that was Arthur Andersen. That's what we did.
But the go-go 90s put unprecedented stress on the integrity of the old safeguards. American capitalism went into overdrive. The stock market skyrocketed. Every CEO was out to boost his company's stock by beating Wall Street's expectations. So companies pushed their numbers to the limit, and some beyond. The incentives were astronomical. High executives were getting massive grants of stock options, a special perk that let corporate insiders pick their moment to buy low, sell high, and cash in big on company stock.
You have executives in many companies who have measured their option packages in millions of shares and sometimes tens of millions of shares. And with that, of course, grows a pressure to make the stock perform at higher levels.
At Enron, the executives had the ability, by jacking up the stock price, to take hundreds of millions of dollars out of the company and keep them through the vehicle of stock options.
And the lure of enormous personal fortunes tempted some corporate executives to cook the books.
When an executive has a portfolio of 100 million stock options, they can make far more money by getting the stock to move a few dollars in response to false information than anybody could do in most insider trading cases.
But options were a hidden cost that never showed up on a company's balance sheet. And that made it harder for ordinary investors to gauge corporate performance.
Stock options should be charged to earnings. They are often a massive cost of production, and they need to show up in the financials in a very clear way so that someone investing in the company today doesn't miss the fact that a couple of years down the line, their stock is suddenly going to be diluted massively and be much less valuable.
So it's honesty in accounting.
It's honesty in accounting.
To help investors and clean up the books, the accounting industry standards setter, an obscure entity in Norwalk, Connecticut known as FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board, decided in 1993 to close the options loophole. Jim Leisenring was then a FASB commissioner.
The costs are fairly significant, and we think that this is a credibility issue, that in fact, financial statements are omitting compensation expense, for some companies, very material amounts of compensation expense. So we thought, and still believe, that it's a matter of the marketplace deserves that information.
Keep our stock options alive!
That touched off a firestorm in corporate America. Ground zero was Silicon Valley, where .com staged a giant demonstration.
We're here for one reason, to stop FASB from raining on our parade.
People had on, T-shirts with a big stop sign on the front that said "Stop FASB" that they were passing out.
Software lobbyist Mark Nebergall was there.
People were signing petitions to the president saying, please don't let him do this. Don't take away my stock options. Well, people were hot under the collar.
Corporate America was livid because making options a business expense would be devastating to the bottom line of many companies. At Internet dynamo Cisco, for example, a $2.6 billion profit one year would have been cut nearly in half. A Maryland study found that expensing options would have slashed profits among leading high-tech companies by an average of 60%.
FASB's just got to get out of this. They can go argue the technical side all they want, but stay out of our stock options.
The more emotional arguments came from the so-called new economy companies, but there was strong opposition from traditional big companies we all know of, General Electric, General Motors. They were opposed as well.
From all over the country, CEOs descended on Washington to beat back FASB.
It was one of the most impressive lobbying efforts on earth. It was protecting CEOs' pay packages.
It was what?
Protecting CEOs' pay packages.
So that's why it generated such enormous heat.
I mean, there's nothing in CEO salaries that compares to the numbers in CEO stock options. It was protecting CEO's pay package. They were out in force.
What's on the line here really is the future of jobs in this country.
Corporate America turned to friends on Capitol Hill like Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut.
Silicon Valley companies came to me at that time and said, we need to use these stock options to lure the brilliant minds from the big companies that are paying them the kinds of salaries we can't pay them, because we're going to give them a stake in the company.
I don't buy that argument one single bit.
Arthur Levitt, President Clinton's new chairman of the SEC, was a Wall Street veteran and former head of the American Stock Exchange.
If it takes a stock option to induce an employee or an executive to come to a company, and that stock option has to be represented as a cost on the balance sheet, in my judgment, America's executives are going to pay that price.
Stock options are a remarkable and uniquely American device.
Senator Lieberman, echoing the accountants, also contended that the cost of options was impossible to calculate.
The concern that I had back in 93 and 94 that I still have is, how do you accurately value an option on the day it's granted?
Companies don't have any trouble figuring out how much options cost them when they list them on their tax returns to reduce their taxes.
Well, you know, that's a separate question, which is an important question. Usually that's done, and it's done more effectively at the time they're exercised.
Why would Lieberman of Connecticut be so desperately interested in this to take the lead?
Well, the insurance companies in Connecticut and the accountants are heavily based in Connecticut. FASB's in Connecticut. Both Senator Lieberman and Senator Dodd have historically been very protective of accountants and very protective of executives, even though they talk a good liberal Democratic line. If you look at the votes and you look at the actions, it's not there.
Led by Senator Lieberman, the Senate passed a non-binding resolution in May 1994.
Clerk will call the roll.
Condemning the FASB proposal by a lopsided 88-9 vote.
It wasn't an accounting debate. We switched talking from about rather have we accurately measured the option to things like Western civilization will not exist without stock options, or that there won't be jobs anymore for people without stock options. People tried to take the argument away from the accounting and over to be just plainly a political argument.
Why is the Senate voting 88-9 or something like that?
There was no question campaign contributions played the determinative role in that Senate activity, and the Congress was responsive to that.
In fact, since 1990, the accounting industry has given over $43 million to candidates for Congress, including nearly $6 million in 1994 during the battle over stock options. When Republicans took over the House with a pro-business agenda that fall, threats to FASB escalated. Was the congressional pressure, in effect, a threat to the independence and even the financial?
No, I'd say it was a threat to the existence of the FASB. The threats were to our existence.
My concern was that if Congress put through a law that muzzled FASB, that would kill independent standard setting. So I went to FASB at that time, and I urged them not to go ahead with the rule proposal.
Levitt and FASB retreated. FASB passed a rule that the cost of stock options should be disclosed, but only in the small print footnotes of corporate reports.
It was probably the single biggest mistake I made in my years at the SEC.
That integrity is a bond, a promise between client and firm, between clients and their customers.
The options battle had tested the loyalty of accountants. In the end, Arthur Andersen and the other big accounting firms sided with corporate America against their own industry's standard setter. James Hooton, then chief of Andersen's worldwide auditing, feared the consequences.
It was the first time that accounting principles had become very, very much influenced by commercial interest and political interest. Congress got involved in that debate. Certainly every company in the United States with a commercial interest got involved in that debate.
Was that good or bad?
It was bad. If you move accounting and accounting standards into the political environment, then you've lost control over whether those standards are the best standards. If you move it into a commercial environment, you've lost control over whether those standards are the best standards.
And what did that decision say?
That decision moved who's in control away from the principles and the professional standards and more to the commercial side, the client side of the business, the presenting a transaction, the best way to present it to show the company's side of the story as opposed to the profession side.
In the battle for stricter accounting, the options fight was a watershed moment. A signal to accountants of looser standards and a green light for corporations to issue options by the truckload.
I've never seen the company stronger. I've never seen a better position.
So the size of the stock packages create a temptation for economic gain that is very corrosive and will lead some people to be willing to lie, to cook up false income, to not tell the truth about negative factors, and in Enron's case, to create an entire picture of a company that didn't exist.
There's a new sunbeam shining on a bright sunny day. What could be better?
And painting a picture that didn't exist was going on at lots of American companies in the 90s. That's what happened at Sunbeam, which, like Enron, was a client of Arthur Andersen. Back in 1998, I profiled Sunbeam's controversial CEO, Al Dunlap, for PBS.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Dunlap was an aggressive corporate turnaround artist brought in by Sunbeam's main owner to make it look good for a corporate takeover and a big financial killing.
I believe the shareholders own the corporation. We work for you.
Dunlop comes in, and all of a sudden, Wall Street goes gaga. The stock price went from $12.50 to a peak of $53 a share.
With a pay packet that included more than 7 million shares and options, Dunlop stood to make over $200 million personally if he could keep Sunbeam's stock price flying. Playing to Wall Street, Dunlop promised totally unprecedented gains for a home appliance maker.
You look at the layoffs that took place, there were about...
He touted the formula of mass layoffs and cost-cutting that had earned him the nickname Chainsaw Al.
We've gone from 26 factories to 8. We've sold all the businesses that don't make sense. We've cut $225 million of costs.
But Dunlap was hiding a secret. It wasn't only his hard-nosed tactics that were driving up the stock. He was using simple accounting tricks okayed by the auditor from Arthur Andersen. It began when Dunlap arrived. He took a bigger financial write-off than he needed to restructure Sunbeam. That gave him 2 advantages. It made things look dismal when he arrived. And he had a huge slush fund to use later to make it look as though he was generating new profits.
At Sunbeam, the company initially established reserves. We called cookie jar reserves. You can borrow from the reserve and have a little jolt to income.
That's exactly what I asked Dunlap about. You said the company lost $230 million in 1996, but the write-off was $337 million. If they lost $230 million, that means without the write-off, they would have made $100 million. So it was a profitable year in 1996, except for the write-off.
No, it wouldn't have been. The losses would have been substantially more than that. Remember, I arrived in July. We instantly made enormous changes to the company. This company was headed downhill.
What Al is doing is creating the steps that he needs to create the illusion of a turnaround. The worse it looks coming in, the better it looks going out.
Over here, we have a total new line of grills.
Dunlap had other gimmicks. In the winter of 1997, he booked millions of dollars of sales of summer products, like outdoor grills.
But this is a prototype.
In fact, Sunbeam wasn't shipping them out, and retailers were not paying for them. They were paper transactions that made Dunlap look great in the short run, but put the future at risk.
You stuff the sales channels. You sell products so far out into the future that when the future comes, you've sold too much product in past times, and it's not likely that you're actually going to be able to maintain that level of sales. There's nothing wrong with that in concept, but if it's not properly disclosed, then you've misled people and you've committed a fraud. And that's what happened in Sunbeam.
In the spring of 1998, Dunlop and his team ran out of accounting tricks.
The general counsel of the company met privately with several board members and said, Al didn't tell you the truth. The quarter is coming in horribly. The numbers are a disgrace. New products that have no sales, inventory issues, accounting issues, and the board decides to fire both Al and the chief financial officer.
With the plot exposed, Sunbeam corrected its books, declared bankruptcy, and the stock price plunged from $53 at its peak to just pennies today.
What are the parallels between Sunbeam and Enron?
The checks and balances at both places fail miserably, right? The auditors at both these companies didn't do their jobs. The lawyers, the external lawyers at both these companies didn't do their jobs. The board of directors, in one way or another, didn't really do their jobs.
For 2 years, the SEC said, this man, Anderson's senior auditor, Philip Harlow, blessed Dunlop's bad books.
Charged the auditor with fraud, that he knowingly or recklessly made false and misleading statements. This wasn't an accident.
Harlow is fighting the charges, but with an SEC lawsuit still pending against him and senior Sunbeam officials, Harlow's lawyers wouldn't let him talk to us. At Sunbeam, the SEC uncovered another more ominous harbinger of the Enron scandal. Anderson accounting documents were destroyed. With an SEC investigation underway, Harlow got orders from Anderson to get rid of certain work documents, and 2 boxes of papers that should have been kept were destroyed, Harlow claimed by mistake. No criminal case was filed, and even though Anderson later admitted that there were significant mistakes in the Sunbeam books endorsed by Harlow, the firm kept him on as managing partner of its Fort Lauderdale office. To critics like Wall Street investment manager Jim Chanos, the reason managements get their way is simple. They've bought off the watchdogs.
The auditors are paid by the corporations. The bond rating agencies are paid in many cases by the issuing corporations. Analysts are paid often on the basis of their investment banking fees that their firms bring in for the companies they are either recommending to buy or sell. So we have all kinds of conflicts of interest that revolve around who is paying whom.
Investor advocate Sarah Taslick puts it even more starkly.
We all know that if 5th graders hired their teachers, teachers would give all A's. That's exactly the situation we currently have. Managers hire auditors to bless the books. Auditors bless the books.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't be surprised that things go awry.
They can't go any other way. People invariably act in their self-interest.
Is anyone protecting the public?
You know, I think the SEC is trying to, but I think that the SEC is basically out of it as well because they're understaffed. It's a major problem.
So the SEC is outgunned, outspent, outmanned?
Completely. Doesn't have a chance.
4 years later, the SEC is still tied up in court pursuing Sunbeam. So far, the only real penalty has come through private litigation.
Well, Anderson ended up settling one key lawsuit for $110 million. Al Dunlop has settled 3 separate suits, having to pay $15 million out of his own pocket.
But even the deterrent of private lawsuits has been blunted by special interest legislation.
It is my great privilege to introduce the next Speaker of the People's House, Newt Gingrich.
In the mid-1990s, Newt Gingrich and the Republicans staged a political revolution. High on their pro-business agenda when they took over the House of Representatives, tort reform, including a law to curb shareholder lawsuits against companies and their accountants. For accountants, it was the climax of years of struggle. They'd paid out $1 billion in stockholder settlements after the savings and loan scandals in the 1980s. I talked about those lawsuits with Joseph Berardino, a longtime partner at Arthur Andersen, who would later head the company as the Enron scandal broke.
Tort reform was something that the profession had talked about for years, and frankly got spooked by the savings loan problems.
What were you trying to do? What did you want tort reform to do for you?
Tort reform was an attempt to at least rein in or limit damages so accounting firms wouldn't go out of business.
As the point man to make their case to Congress in 1991, the accounting industry chose a prominent securities lawyer, Harvey Pitt. Pitt's clientele included corporations and big accounting firms like Arthur Andersen.
There have been cases that were filed that I thought raised frivolous issues and in which companies were, in effect, blackmailed into settling or else required to spend extraordinary amounts of time and energy getting rid of. The sole thing the bill was aimed at curtailing were frivolous lawsuits.
All these people got together to say, we don't like being sued for falsehoods and misbehavior.
But they said it was to stop frivolous lawsuits, that there were lawsuits that were insubstantial. There were too many of them being brought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was there something to that?
Any lawsuit in their lexicon was frivolous.
Any lawsuit brought by San Diego attorney Bill Larack was what the accountants and their business allies wanted to stop.
This fraud could not have been accomplished by a few corporate executives.
Larack had become the despised poster boy for the tort reform cause, earning tens of millions of dollars personally from filing class action suits against corporations.
Bill Larack was the guy whose picture had the target on it. When you thought of securities litigation reform, you thought of trying to put Bill Larack out of business. He was the Antichrist, if you will.
And this complaint now names additional parties.
Among Larack's favorite targets were Silicon Valley high-tech firms.
Virtually any company in Silicon Valley was scared to death of the guy. They all knew who he was.
Pressed by the high-tech and accounting industries, the House and Senate passed the bill by large majorities. But President Clinton vetoed it, asserting that it would close the courthouse door on investors with legitimate claims.
Including countless meritorious suits.
Some Senate Democrats rallied behind their president.
But it's safe to say that crooks will be emboldened, investor confidence in our markets will go down, and defrauded investors will not be compensated.
But what happened next stunned observers.
But I believe that the override is the proper course to follow here.
Senator Chris Dodd of Connecticut, then head of the Democratic National Committee, led the effort to overturn Clinton's veto.
It is with a deep sense of regret that I'm on the opposite side of my president on this issue.
Chris Dodd, here he is as chairman of the Democratic Party, but he's also the leading advocate in the U.S. Senate on behalf of the accounting industry, and he helps overturn the veto of his own president, who installed him as Democratic chairman. Chris Dodd might as well have been on the accounting industry's payroll. He couldn't have helped them any more than he did as a U.S. senator.
By way of thanks, the accounting industry gave Senator Dodd nearly $250,000 in political donations, even though at the time Dodd was not up for re-election.
The accountants were the big winners with the Litigation Reform Act. The law imposed a proportionate liability standard, which means that if the accountants only contribute to, say, 20% of a loss, then they would only be responsible for 20% of the amount that would have to be paid.
Less risk for accountants, among others, critics said, would mean less of a deterrent to wrongdoing.
But after the bell, a round of high-profile warnings.
And the late 90s brought an explosion in major accounting failures.
Dollar General has fired Deloitte & Touche as its auditor and is...
Ernst & Young had signed off on this company.
Audit information from Lucent's outside accounting firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, as part of its...
Corporate financial restatements skyrocketed to levels never seen before. Just 3 in 1981, up to 156 in 2000. All the big accounting firms were implicated. PricewaterhouseCoopers, Andersen, KPMG, Deloitte & Touche, Ernst & Young. During the 90s, more than 700 U.S. companies had to correct financial reports that were just plain wrong.
For the last half dozen years, investors had lost probably close to $100 billion, suffered those type of losses from these situations like Sendent, Waste Management, Sunbeam, MicroStrategy, Rite Aid, Lucent, Xerox. Then along comes Enron. Phenomenal. And we add on now every day, Global Crossing and others. Investors are now looking at losses probably coming close to $200 billion. It is real damage to the country.
Finally, the SEC had had enough. On the next case, in fact, the biggest case until Enron, it went after Arthur Andersen. The first time in 20 years the SEC had sued a major accounting firm. It charged Andersen with helping to cover up what the agency called a massive financial fraud motivated by greed. It involved a trash-collecting empire, Waste Management.
Waste Management was the Microsoft of the 80s. They bought hundreds and then thousands of garbage companies, and they increased their sales and their profits year after year after year.
There were obvious parallels to Sunbeam and Enron. Andersen was the auditor, the company's stock price had soared, and its top managers had made tens of millions of dollars on stock options. But then Waste Management hit a wall.
They couldn't buy thousands of garbage companies anymore. There weren't that many left. So the strategy, this growth strategy that propelled them as a high-flying stock, was gone.
So they turned to accounting tricks to make Wall Street think the company was still growing. One gimmick simply involved stretching out depreciation on company assets. Garbage dumps, trucks, giant metal trash bins.
They changed the earnings of the company by quite a bit of money, more than $100 million.
Wait a second. You can change the earnings picture of Waste Management by more than $100 million simply by changing the lifespan of a garbage container?
Of an episode. Well, they had 1 million of them. These were these huge, big steel containers. And so if you're depreciating them over 12 years, it's a lot more expensive than if you depreciate them over 18 years.
Former Republican SEC Chairman Rod Hills joined the board of directors in a shakeup forced by big outside investors. The new team found that the company had exaggerated its earnings by $1.7 billion, a gambit that would cost investors a fortune when the stock plummeted. Arthur Andersen's senior auditing partner, James Hooton, reviewed his own firm's work.
It was wrong.
Flat out, easy, clear, wrong?
Not all things easy, clear. Not all things easy, clear. Some were easy, clear, wrong. I won't duck that. Some were easy, clear, wrong. Others were more difficult.
The SEC discovered a long-running cover-up, not just by Waste Management, but by Arthur Andersen as well.
Arthur Andersen allowed the company to publish its financials, knowing that there were mistakes in the financials, with a promise that the company would, in the future, make whatever changes and adjustments were necessary to correct the failures of the past. Unfortunately, the company never did what they were supposed to do.
It was actually a treaty. They all signed it. The auditor signed it. The management signed it and said, we will do this.
Did they do it?
No, they did not do it.
For how many years?
At least 6.
How can this go on for 6 years and neither the board nor the auditors blow the whistle?
The board doesn't know about it. At least the audit committee does not know. Audit committee of the board does not know of it. And management doesn't want to tell them, and the auditors don't want to tell them.
But, I mean, that's a breakdown in the system,
You bet it is. You bet it is. It absolutely tells you that the weaknesses that you see in Enron and Waste Management can be seen in many other companies. I've had to participate in the firing of 9 chief executive officers over 30 years. In each case, the auditors, after we asked the CEO to leave, told us of problems that were in the statements that they had not brought to the attention of the board.
Because?
Because management didn't want them to. It's the pressures. You cannot possibly understand the fear. If you are the audit partner in charge of a large account, you need to keep that account. And if you're not protected by the outside audit committee on that board, you will yield on the margin to something management wants you to do that in your heart you think you shouldn't do.
Andersen and Waste Management paid a steep price in stockholder settlements, but no one went to jail.
We certainly have seen in the securities markets the clear lesson that when people stand to make millions and millions of dollars from breaking the law, that the risk of simply getting a civil judgment is not enough to defer the conduct. And so a realistic criminal deterrent is part of a healthy system. People have to understand that if you knowingly allow millions of people to be cheated, you can end up in jail.
The SEC fined Anderson $7 million. Anderson promised never to do it again, but they were already enmeshed in new trouble at Enron.
It would appear from the outside that Anderson took the waste management injunction and the whole process as not much more seriously than you or I might take getting a ticket for going 35 in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. They just didn't use that as the wake-up call to say, my God, how could this happen in our firm? And we need to make changes to never let this happen again.
But inventiveness isn't just a goal. It's the way we do business.
By the late 90s, corporations had put the squeeze on auditing fees.
And that the product of our inventiveness should be real.
So accountants had to find a new way to cash in on the boom economy.
In fact, we created most of the 43 service lines we're now in, including Anderson Consulting.
Consulting. Once a small fraction of their business, consulting on finance, partnerships, computer programs, taxes, had become the main profit center. At the SEC, Arthur Levitt saw that as a conflict of interest, accountants fearing to lose rich consulting deals with a corporate client as a result of a tough audit.
They clearly had a conflict of interest, and some of them abused the public that they were supposed to protect.
Levitt had a fix. Get the big accounting firms to stop doing major consulting jobs for their audit clients. In early 2000, he floated the idea to the accounting industry.
They told me, we're not with you, Arthur. This is going to be war. We're going to fight you all the way. We'll fight you in the Congress, and we'll fight you in the courts.
Well, you're taking the bread and butter away from large accounting firms when you make a proposal that would take away their largest growth opportunity. So understandably, there was quite a very strong violent reaction.
Leading accountants like Anderson's Joe Berardino claimed there was no conflict of interest and bristled at regulation by the SEC.
Among other things they disagreed with at the time is that the government was forcing the whole profession to a certain model. I do believe the market is a better place than the government in deciding how the market should be formed.
It was decided. It sounds like you talked about it and decided it together.
To block Levitt, the accounting industry turned to friends on Capitol Hill like Louisiana's Billy Tauzin, a powerful House Republican. Tauzin had received nearly $300,000 from the accounting industry since 1989.
Billy Tauzin seems to have been especially important in that process. Why?
He had an oversight responsibility, budget and otherwise, for the SEC, so he had a special interest.
So he could get Arthur Levitt's attention in a way almost nobody else could.
Yeah.
And Tauzin took the cue. Along with fellow Republicans Thomas Bliley and Michael Oxley, Tauzin sent a clear message to Arthur Levitt.
This is a letter from the Congressional Committee that oversees the SEC that has a chokehold on the existence of the SEC, directing me to go slow on this issue.
How do you interpret that?
That was a threat.
Shot across your bow.
Without a question.
In their war against Levitt, the accountants spent $23 million in campaign contributions and lobbying. Their effort set loose a flood of mail from Congress, pressuring Levitt to back off.
We were getting letters from people we'd never heard from, and the types of letters we were getting from them were very similar in terms of tone and phrases and words.
And what's that say to you?
Well, it says to me that the accounting lobbyists were writing their letters.
Levitt refused to back down, and Congress turned up the heat.
As we got down toward the end of the congressional session, the threats were made. Arthur, if you go ahead with this proposal, it is likely that a rider will be placed upon your appropriations bill, which says that the SEC will not be funded if they proceed with the issue of auditor independence.
Who made that threat?
a variety of members of Congress told me that they weren't going to do it, but they knew others who were going to do it.
Finally, Levitt gave in. He let audit firms keep their consulting work. All they had to do was inform corporate audit committees.
As a result of this pressure, we modified the rule, and that was a compromise that I would not make today that I agreed to at the time.
When you look back on this whole episode, what's the lesson to you?
I saw a group of entities that I think had forgotten their public responsibilities. The accounting profession is the only profession, private profession, with public responsibilities. And I saw them fight tooth and nail to, instead of accentuating and emphasizing their public responsibilities, they said our business model is about consulting. And once and for all, we're going to let you know that you can't mess with us. And they did that through the force of money.
And those who got the most money from accountants like Billy Tozan
You're trying to tell me that wasn't an extraordinarily limited review?
are today among the most vocal critics of Enron on Capitol Hill.
Many of the people complaining loudest about how shocked they are that there's a problem with this industry not being closely regulated were two peas in a pod, close with the industry themselves, helping the industry get deregulated throughout the 90s. Billy Tozan, Chris Dodd, Senator Lieberman from Connecticut. And when journalists try to talk to them now about their flip-flop, many of them are just not available for comment.
Thank you very much for your time.
Senator Lieberman had talked to us, but both Senator Dodd and Chairman Tozan refused our repeated requests for interviews. By the end of the 90s, accountants were so intertwined with their corporate clients, the line between them was often blurred. In fact, when the SEC tried to break them apart to reestablish auditor independence, Levitt received this very revealing letter from one Kenneth Lay, CEO of Enron.
Ken Lay wrote me a letter during the debate over the issue of auditor independence, urging me not to proceed with this rulemaking because his relationship with his accountant, Arthur Anderson, had been such that consulting was terribly important to the well-being of Enron.
So Ken Lay didn't want that broken up, that relationship with Anderson?
No, he did not.
According to Lay's letter, Arthur Anderson, with more than 100 people working on the $58 million Enron account, had become an integral part of the Enron team. In fact, according to an investigation for Enron's board, Anderson was closely involved in structuring Enron's controversial off-book partnerships.
Why does a company like Enron, which is going gangbusters, create hundreds of these off-balance book partnerships? What's the point?
To get debt off the balance sheet, to make the company look more stable financially than it really is.
Enron's accounting practices became so aggressive that several Anderson audit experts, like partner Carl Bass, began to object. Bass was part of an elite group at Anderson, protecting the quality of audits.
So Carl Bass and the technical group would have been one of those who was keeping the rules pure.
He was a member of that group that kept the rules pure. The keepers of the Holy Grail, they're the experts. They're the best that your firm has to offer.
For 2 years, Bass fired off memos challenging Enron's accounting. Eventually, Enron got so angry at what it called Bass's cynicism that it demanded that he be taken off the account, and Anderson complied.
Well, why would you remove the technical guy who's the protector of your integrity at the request of a client?
Well, it's very unusual that we would remove somebody. The client wants to feel that you're understanding their business problem, that you're understanding what they're trying to accomplish with their accounting for a business transaction. And if you have people that either don't have the bedside manner, don't have the capability, don't have the expertise to get in the client's shoes to understand it, clients react negatively, okay? Then we've got to make a judgment call as to whether they're objecting to that service for the right reason or the wrong reasons. And, you know, it's very rare that we remove somebody. Obviously this is one of those rare situations.
But other Anderson partners were also growing uneasy. In a conference call between Houston and Chicago in February 2001, 10 months before Enron went bust, 14 Anderson partners debated whether to keep Enron as a client. But they projected that the Enron account would soon be worth $100 million a year to Anderson and decided to stick with Enron. Even inside Enron, people were sensing imminent disaster. Last August, Enron Vice President Sharon Watkins, herself a former Anderson accountant, warned CEO Ken Lay that Enron was about to collapse in a wave of accounting scandals. Later to Congress, Watkins implicated Anderson.
Is it possible that Arthur Anderson has some culpability here because they signed off on it?
Well, I think so, because they're charged with auditing the results, and a sensitive related party transaction should get a lot of scrutiny.
So Arthur Anderson, in your opinion, signed off on something they shouldn't have?
Yes.
Do you think they knew what they were signing off on?
They sure should have known what they were signing off on.
Okay.
In August, Watkins had also warned Anderson, but it took 2 more months before Enron's books were corrected, restating and reducing Enron's net worth by $1.2 billion and sending Enron's stock into a tailspin.
I suggest you fasten your seatbelt.
By then, Anderson was in big trouble. The SEC was investigating.
Will you please come forward? Would you please rise and raise your right hand?
And David Duncan, its lead partner on the Enron account, had his staff shredding documents. On Anderson's orders, he later testified.
You are now
But Anderson CEO Joseph Berardino blamed Duncan and fired him.
And I wanted to give him a message, because at the time everyone was looking at me and us, that this was not a culture that would stand that kind of behavior.
Something like 80 people in that office were involved. If this had been something that had really been against Anderson policy, wouldn't some of those people have picked up the phone or written an email to headquarters and say, hey, we're destroying 20 boxes of Enron material. Should we be doing this?
All I know is that those activities were taken under David's direction. There was absolutely no cover-up.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, I hope you find it very interesting, that video on the conflict of interest, how the auditors corrupted at that time, and how many companies are also doing creative accounting. So it's not something that came from Asia. It actually came from United States of America, the most advanced country in the world. But fraudulent accounting, false accounting was very common. And so that's why regulations were passed in the year 2002 by United States. They're called Sarbanes-Oxley, and then in Malaysia we have our own Capital Market Services Act to try to reduce such incidences, but it still happened. Okay, it still happened. Just give me a second. Okay, just do a quick attendance confirmation. Iman is here. Go is here. Go Chule.
Yes.
Intan is here, of course. Kamaria is here. Yes. Muhammad bin Ghazali is here.
Yes.
Good. Is Imam Jihad bin Ismail? Muhammad Imam?
Ada.
Noradila? Okay, good. Noradila?
Ada.
Okay. Ada. Sarah, ada?
Ada, sir.
Good. And Lian Kai is here? Yes, I can see you're there. Virunta is here today. Yes. So all present today. Good. So just a recap. What we did last week was we went through the type of auditors. So we have external independent auditors. They are required by Akta Syarikat Companies Act 2016. Then we came across who audit the government is the Auditor General. Okay, Auditor General, not Attorney General, Auditor General, which is required by the Audit Act 1957. Then we have audits by tax department that is conducted under the Income Tax Act 1967. Then we discuss about internal audit, juru audit dalam, which is required by the Capital Market Services Act 2007 and also by Bursa Listing Rule, right? And by the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance 2021. So these are the four main types we discussed last week. So apart from this type of audits, there are also forensic audit. These are auditors who come in to try to find evidence on wrongdoings for the purposes of charging the alleged offenders. Then you could also audit by Bank Negara auditors under Financial Services Act. They have the power to come to audit banks. So there are all kinds of audits. And now we have ESG and environmental, social, and governance. We have new type of audits coming up. So auditing is like a way of life, like a way of life. And basically, what they believe in is if you don't audit, then people will probably not follow. So we need to what they call it, do some enforcement, some audit to keep them honest, so to say. So the first part of the audio, video that we saw last week and we continue to today is Enron. Enron is one of the biggest scandals, globally. I think losses were something like USD 100 billion, which is reasonably big compared with our own 1MDB scandal. I think our own 1MDB scandal is about 30 billion US dollars. So compared with Enron, of course, Enron is much bigger. And after Enron, we have another collapse of our WorldCom. I think it's even bigger. And then in the year 2008, there was a collapse of Lehman Brothers due to also very aggressive marketing and risky behavior by Lehman Brothers, as well as accounting issues. I think about 1 trillion US dollars went in smoke in 2008, which is called the Great Financial Crisis. So I think every 10 years we have some crisis globally and financially. All right. So in 1997, we have the Asian financial crisis, the called Tom Yum crisis. It happened in Asia in 1997, where many Asian countries were close to collapse. Yeah. That was due to too much USD borrowing and speculation in the currency market. So the local currencies collapsed, the property market also collapsed. So the Asian countries collapsed one by one. And during that time, Malaysia actually implemented capital control to try to preserve our financial system. Then in 2000, there was this crisis caused by the attack on the World Trade Center. So there was this political unrest, and also the year 2000 was also the IT bubble collapse due to the internet. The internet bubble. People think internet will be the way of the future. So there were many speculations on these .com companies, and this bubble burst in the year 2000. Then in 2008, there was a crisis in the US triggered by low interest rates, which resulted in a property boom, and property boom caused the property price to bubble up. Yeah, to bubble up, and what happened was the banks were complicit in pushing up the property prices further by lending out money, mortgages to people who are not qualified by faking palsu punya applications. So this is called subprime because these loans are given out to people who are not qualified, but they still get loans in US to buy houses on the belief that house price will never come down. So everybody were pushing mortgage loans, out, faking the loan documents, and of course, if you offer loans to people, people would take it to buy properties. So when the property busts, the banks lose a lot of money, and Lehman Brothers is one of the investment bank that collapsed from that scandal. Yeah. Okay. Any questions so far on the documentaries that you saw today? Anything interesting you want to discuss? This documentary actually will come out in your assignment and also probably in your exam also in terms of essay questions. So you should know the background story, the chronological order of Enron, WorldCom. There's a few more that we will discuss as we go along, but WorldCom, Enron is quite big ones that you should know. Do some Googling and research. You'll be asked questions like, what kind of structure can be put in place to prevent such a scandal from happening again? Because many people get hurt. Hundreds of billions went up in smoke, and many innocent people lost money and lost their retirement money as well, And of course, the CEO and management very often got away very rich because they jumped ship, sold the shares and make a lot of money and say goodbye, before the collapse. As you saw in the documentary just now. Any questions on the first Enron documentary? Anything interesting that you want to discuss, bring up? No one. The second one on the bigger than Enron. So the second video show a lot of the smaller companies involved and also the role of auditors, how they become corrupted around the year 2000, 2001, because auditors were making a lot of money from consulting. In America, they call accountants as auditors also, loosely call the same name. So when they say accountants, they really mean auditors. In Malaysia, we call accountants. Auditors is auditors in Malaysia. So in Malaysia, to be a qualified auditor, you need to be a qualified accountant first with MIA, and then you attend interview with Bank Negara, Ministry of Finance, and also you need to work for 2 years with an accounting firm, public accounting firm, then attend the interview to apply for your license. So the license is good for 2 years, audit license, and then if you want to audit listed companies, you have to get another additional license from the Audit Oversight Board, which is actually the auditor of the auditor, which is part under the Securities Commission. Okay, today we will try to tackle one of the coursework that is called under quiz. Did you all receive in the WhatsApp? I already posted the assignment quiz. Can you open it on your handphone and have a look at it? If you don't have, just let me know. I will repost it again, maybe for those who will join the group late. You may not have got it. It's called quiz. Okay, I will repost all the 3 again in case you have not got it. Okay, then you open the quiz. If you look at your WhatsApp, if you open your quiz, you'll find the question, terangkan bahagian audit dan penyata kewangan akta syarikat. I may add akta syarikat 2016 because this act was amended. The old act was 1960 something, so the act was amended in 2016. Apanya tujuan pengauditan? apa ni jenis juru audit, apa ni teknik untuk mengaudit aset tetap. So this quiz is worth 20 marks. Actually, it's probably an open book quiz lah. We want to do it together in class today, yeah. So if you can open up the thing, and then maybe you want to open up on your PC your words, your quiz and assignment, everything, you should do it in Microsoft Word, and then you email it to me. I'll give you an address afterwards, email address. You email to me in Microsoft Word. Don't PDF your assignments and quiz and so on. Submit everything in Microsoft Words, okay? Now, let me, okay, have you all opened up already? Have you found it? Anybody? All found it, please?
Yes.
Okay, good, huh? Okay, so now I will look at how to tackle this. Okay, let's look at the first part. Describe the audit and financial statement sections of the Companies Act. Okay, I've also shared with you all a PDF copy of the Act itself, one in Bahasa and the other one in English, Bahasa English. So you can choose the format, the book that you want and open it. Okay, I will choose the English one lah. Akta Syarikat. Okay, if you open up the Act, I think Act 777, if I'm not mistaken, it's in English. There's a Bahasa version and an English version. Okay, you see the word Act 777 reprinted. So it's called Companies Act 2016. This Act has got, I think, 400 pages. I don't expect you to know the whole Act by heart. Today we are only looking at two sections, okay? Two sections. The two sections are basically concerned with financial statements and with the audit. So if you look at section 2, if we look at the index, I'm looking at section 243, financial statement and report, all the way to 261, auditor statement, and then subdivision 2, which talks about auditors, from 262, section 262, all the way to section 273, and then general provisions relating to auditors, 287. Okay, and then it finishes off with indemnity and insurance for officers and auditors, and it finishes off at section 289. Do you see that? So in your WhatsApp, I've posted the Act itself, Akta Syarikat 2016. If we see that Act 7777, open it, it's about 500 pages long. You can buy the book in the popular bookstore, but I think you don't need to buy, like you just use this Act, right? Because in your exam under essay is an open book test, so you may want to have another computer to open up this Act so that you can refer to the Act during your exam. If you want to buy the book, also can. I don't think it's that expensive. It's a law book called Akta Syarikat 2016 in Bahasa, and there's also the English version, Companies Act 2016. Okay. Now, how to answer the first part of the question is basically I want you all to summarize the Act, okay, to maybe 13 pages or something like that, because from 290 section, from section 269, from section 243 to the last section of auditors is quite thick. So I want you to condense it, summarize it, right, in very short form, in simple English, what those Act means, yeah? So actually, being able to condense it and summarize it is itself a skill. If you can condense it and summarize it, that means you have more or less like internalize it and you really know what is the content of the act in relation to financial statements and in relation to jury auditors. Okay. Now I would suggest that you all start to open up your words copy. Let's do it together. Yeah, let's do it together. Because I know go back home very susah to do assignments, right, and quiz and things like that. Let's do this quiz together, okay? So you may want to do a table form or you can do essay form. It's fine in Bahasa English or Bahasa BM, up to you. I think about 13 pages long, 14 pages long will be good. Okay, let's have a look at a possible way to answer the question, the format. Huh? Okay, can you see this? Are you able to see this? Describe the first part we're trying to answer. Describe the audit and financial statement sections of the Companies Act. So in your answer, okay, is you should mention Companies Act 2016, Part 3, Management of Company, Division 3 on Accounts and Audit, and Subdivision 1, right, financial statements and reports. So now we are looking at financial statements and reports. What is in the financial statements of a company, right, of a company? You may want to start, creating a table. You must well fit in your answer now, rather than wait. So can you open up your words, Microsoft Words, open up in your computer or on another computer if you want. We can start to fill in the figures, all right? Fill in the figures. So have you opened up the words already?
Yes, Mr. Ken.
Good. Then let's do it together because I know it's very susah to go and do it at home. You must all do it together, right? Together now. Okay, so you can fill in, you can see 243 is actually introduction, bukan? It's an interpretation. So you can put 243 interpretation. It actually refers to Financial Reporting Act 1997 for the meaning of approved accounting standard. That's what 243 means. So you look at 243, long story, you condense it, this is basically what it means. Now, what about 244? 244 basically say compliance with approved accounting standards. You must comply, whether you are a private or public company, financial statement must not, I wasn't sure, must follow, should follow, or shall follow the approved accounting standards and circulated to its members or shareholders. However, in some rare occasion, if the directors feel that the report will not give a true and fair view, benar dan saksama outlook, a view on the company, then there's no need to follow the accounting standards, but you need to disclose the reasons and give particulars and also inform the company's commission or register of companies about this. Okay, about this. So the only time there's no need to follow, okay, is you have to give a reason. The reason is that by following the standard, it will result in the accounts becoming not true and fair. But you need to disclose the reason and give particulars on the effect if the accounting standards will comply with. Yeah. And you must apply for approval. You must apply for approval, okay, with the company's commission. With the company's commission. Have you got that? So you should type in 243, 244. Okay, the next one. (245). What are the accounts to be kept? The accounting records and relevant supporting documents should be kept, your entries should be made within 60 days, you know. So if you sell something, you record your recording of the sales and recording of the transaction should be made within 60 days. And the records should be kept for 7 tahun. 7 tahun. It may be kept in the office or other places which is available for inspection by the registrar of companies or the company's commission. Records of operation outside Malaysia, if you have an overseas operation, no need to be kept in Malaysia, but should be available for inspection upon request. What happened tak ikut? If you don't follow, you kena denda 3 tahun atau denda 500,000, 500,000 ringgit, or can get both. Okay, can get both jail and fine. So far so good. So we have 243, 244, 245. Then 246, 246 talks about kawalan dalam, system of internal control. Okay, those with the camera, we want to take a snapshot also, so that you can work off your camera, your screenshot afterwards to key in. Actually, you must well key in now as well. System of internal control. Companies must have kawalan dalam, must have in place a kawalan dalam to prevent loss from unauthorized use, and to make sure that the transactions are authorized, okay, and recorded in a benar dan saksama view, in a true and fair view. Okay, so if you don't have kawalan dalam and you're very negligent, criminally negligent, grossly negligent, right? Then you can be charged in court, and if you are convicted, you will be liable to a fine not exceeding 1 million ringgit, or imprisonment not exceeding 3 tahun or kedua-dua. Quite stiff, isn't it? This one, quite tough, quite tough. In America, the same infringement will be 20 tahun jail, 20 years jail in the United States now. So this, how do we compare the Act in 2016 versus the Act in the 1960s 3 Act? Is that the previous Companies Act was much more lenient in punishment. The new Companies Act 2016 is much more tougher, and the punishment is much more severe compared with the other Act. Okay. So far, any questions? We have 243, Section 244, Section 245, Section 246, and Section 247. We're coming now. You can interrupt, as I go along. Please ask any questions. If you're not clear, just bring it up. Don't be shy. Just hit your, your speak button, or unmute yourself, and just shoot your questions. Makes it more interesting if you ask some questions, lah. Okay, 247 talks about accounting periods. Under Companies Act, all the companies in the group. So when your auditor audit a company, it not only just audit that company, it also audit the company and its subsidiaries, anak syarikat. It's just like you take your photograph, you're the principal photograph. I also want to take a photograph of your family photograph. So in Akta Syarikat, you need to prepare company's account. You also need to not to prepare penyata kumpulan, group accounts. So the group accounts is the consolidated accounts. So if your company owns many subsidiaries, all the subsidiaries should have the same balance date, should have the same financial year balance date. For example, you have a calendar balance date from 1st January to 31st December 2023. All your subsidiaries basically should have the same balance date, you know. If the balance date is 30th June 2023, then all your other subsidiaries should also follow the same balance date, that is 30th June 2023, and so on. So some companies have balance date December, some June, some September, depending on the cases cases. So, but of course, sometimes you or your company buy another company, so the other company may have a different balance date. So if a company becomes a subsidiary, the financial year, they give you 2 years, all right, 2 years to make sure that the what do you call it, the balance date coincide. Now, if you don't follow, okay, you will commit an offense, but they don't specify what's the punishment here. 248, who prepares the account? Question asked lah. Who prepares the account? Anybody? Siapa? Who prepared the account? I can hear somebody trying to unmute. Siapa yang menyiapkan penyata kewangan? Is it audit accountant?
Accountant.
Okay, somebody say accountant. Anybody else? Auditor. Somebody say auditor prepare accounts.
Auditor and signed by the director.
Okay, auditor prepare accounts and then signed by the directors. There's another point of view. Okay, actually many people confuse. In the old days, auditor do accounts for you, so they also sign the accounts, you know. Then director sign off. We are quite right lah during those times. But now under Akta Syarikat 2016, the directors are the ones that are primarily responsible to prepare the financial statements, but of course they can hire an accountant to do the job, all right? But the primary responsibility, tanggungjawab penyata kewangan adalah pengarah, not even the shareholders. It is primarily the responsibility of the directors to prepare the accounts and also to sign the accounts. So if anything wrong, actually the accountant can walk away free, usually. Okay, walk away free and point his finger at the directors, because they say, I'm the employee, I just do the accounts. The director is supposed to check, right? So the directors legally under Akta Syarikat should prepare the accounts. Although he may delegate this to his accountant, the accountant is actually not responsible. The directors are responsible. Okay, so the director should prepare financial statement. If it's a new company, they're given 18 months to prepare the first set of accounts. Okay, if it is an old company, at the end of each financial year, they're given 6 months to prepare the financial statement and get it audited. Not just prepare account, the account should be audited before being released for Mesyuarat Agong for the meeting, AGM. So that's why when you go for AGM, the accounts are usually tabled to the shareholders, but it is not for approval of shareholders. Okay, the shareholders can ask the questions and tembak the directors, but the shareholders are not responsible for approving the financial statement. The one that approve the financial statements are the directors. The responsibility for the financial statement are also the directors. If anything is wrong and somebody have to go to jail for the penyata kewangan, it is the pengarah that have to go for the jail sentence lah on conviction. So if a director do not prepare financial statement or prepare fraudulent financial statements, right, like creative accounting, false accounting, on conviction, he'll be charged in court lah, of course. On conviction, the director will be liable for a fine not exceeding 500,000 ringgit or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year or kedua-dua. Okay, so this sentence is quite lenient. Compare with American American standards. American standards, you saw the documentary, can kena 10 years to 20 years jail for this kind of crime, alleged crime, you're on conviction. But in Companies Act is only what 1 year. 1 year, I think not so bad lah. If you can earn a few hundred million, cooking the books, and then you kena 1 year fine, it's okay lah. 1 year jail, okay what? But however, don't be so happy. There is another act that would apply to directors of listed companies under Capital Market Services Act 2007. So if they can be charged under that section of the act, the jail sentence can be up to 10 years. Okay, up to 10 years. So you can be hit with different acta. All right, so it's important to know what act you'll be charged with. Now, let me ask you, if you're a director of a company, would you prefer to be charged by the Securities Commission, or to be charged by the Companies Commission, or to be charged by Bukit Aman Police, PDRM? Which one would you prefer? Suppose you have done something for your boss, and so you did some creative accounting . Now, if you had to be charged in the court, which one would you prefer? To be charged under Securities Commission, under the Companies Commission, or by Bukit Aman, the PDRM, by the police? Which one would you prefer? Anyone? Make a choice.
Company X.
Okay, you choose Companies Act. Anybody else? Imagine you've been charged of this. I can't hear you too well. There's a feedback. Maybe try again and see what do you say?
Bukit Aman.
Okay, you prefer to be charged under Bukit Aman. Okay. So one Bukit Aman, one Companies Commission. Anybody else? No, this is interesting case study in case it happened to you . Which one would you prefer? If you have a choice. Sometimes your lawyer try his best to get you charged under a particular act, that is more lenient for you . Anybody else? One last guess. So we got one choice of Companies Commission, one choice of Bukit Aman. Anybody want to choose Securities Commission? Securities Commission, anybody want to choose? Nobody. If you don't choose, all will be charged under Bukit Aman,
I choose.
You choose? Which one? Securities Commission?
Yeah.
Okay so one of each. Okay, let me tell you this. If you want to choose to be charged, better choose Companies Commission. Because so far, Companies Commission, very few people go to jail. And also they do things very slow. Okay? Quite slow . So if you are wrong, you prefer to be charged by Companies Commission because they are lambat, And also they are quite kind. They don't really try to maximize the jail sentence. They give chance. They give chance a bit. Now, somebody choose Bukit Aman. Bukit Aman, what they do to you first thing? They lock you up, isn't it? So they lock you up in the lockup. You know what happened in the lockup or not? I know of some people actually come out, you bukan manusia lagi lah. So in the lockup, you don't know what happened, Now in Companies Commission, they don't really put you in a lockup lah. Okay, so you'll be given bail and then whatever. But in Bukit Aman, if they arrest you, they have the right to remand you for how many days? 7 days, 7 hari. Okay, so in the 7 days, I don't know what they can do to a person lah. You heard horror stories, right? Nothing verified, but you often hear horrible stories. So I heard from somebody from this group called Lion Group, where if the boss is called William Chang, if he catch anybody stealing his steel bars or inventory, he will call the police to come, Bukit Aman, and lock the fella up for 7 days. After 7 days, this guy will himself also resign. Okay, so in terms of the police, they are not so well versed on the akta, but they have other ways of making a person confess. Yeah, this is true anecdotal evidence. There's no black and white proof, but this is what I heard. So don't opt for Bukit Aman if you can help it. Okay. In terms of Securities Commission, okay, there's a second best. They have got very good people there, very educated, very technically qualified people. They are not rough. Okay, they are not rough. They would talk to you nicely. They'll be very professional, but they are very good in what they do. Okay, so if you want to be charged, I'd rather be charged by Companies Act Commission because they are not so competent in a way. If you're a good lawyer, you can get off more easily. If you go to Bukit Aman, those guys are not good at ACTA and the Companies Act, but they can do something to you that, make you change your mind. And because of the fact that they can remand you for 7 days without any court order or whatever, they just have to remand you for 7 days, then your lawyer try to get you released. If you cannot release, then remand you for another 7 days. Okay. Now, Securities Commission, they're professional. They don't have remand in terms of locking you up. They don't have cells in Securities Commission. They will talk to you, and then if they want to charge you, they will charge you in the court. Okay, and then your lawyer can get bail to stay out of prison while we are contesting the case. Okay, so remember, always opt for Companies Commission. It's a less onerous. Okay, let's go to general requirements. General requirements is, this is a very interesting one, 249. They never say that your account must be chun accurate to the cent, right? The general requirement of financial statement, penyata kewangan, is the annual statement and consolidated financial statement, kumpulan, shall give benar dan saksama, true and fair view of the financial statement of the company, and notes to the account shall include directors' gaji, remuneration, retirement benefit, compensation for loss of office, and dealings in favor of directors and audited related fees. Okay, so 249 tells you that the accounts may not be accurate to the cent, but it should give you a true and fair view. So sometimes what is true is not fair. Sometimes you may be accurate, but you not present a very fair view of the situation. It may be factually correct for you to disclose something like as it is. But special disclosure, how? Do you need special attention? This is what true and fair means. I'll try to give you a good example. Okay, good example. Your teeth. I think you got about 40 teeth. If you count, about 45 or something like that. Gigi. Now, if you lose one teeth, is it material or not? That requires special disclosure. Anybody? For discussion, okay, what is true and fair? You have 45 teeth, gigi. Kalau you hilang satu, is it material enough to require a special disclosure in the accounts or penyata kewangan, or in some kind of announcement? Does it require an announcement of special disclosure? Anybody? 45 teeth? You know why? Because 1 over 45 is less than 2%, right? So you say not material because in terms of materiality, the amount is very small. 1 teeth over 45, less than 3%, less than 1% lah. Okay, so I think that is fulfilled technically. That you think you're doing true and fair, but true and fair is judgmental, very judgmental. Now, what if I tell you you lose one teeth, but it is your front teeth. Is it more material? If you lose one teeth, it's a back teeth, not material. And then if you lose the front teeth, is it more material? Every time you smile, you look like because the position of the teeth is in front. And what is worse is your career as a newsreader. You work for Astro newsreader. Is it something very material?
Of course.
Then it becomes very, although it's just one teeth, same, one teeth. 1/45, just now somebody mentioned not material because in terms of quantum, okay, I think fair enough, it's not material, especially if the teeth loss is in the back, cannot see lah. All right, so not material, no need to disclose. Example, but if the teeth is a front tooth, it becomes more material because whenever you smile, you have to cover your mouth with your hand, right? So it is more troublesome. Yeah, so you have to quickly go and get your denture done lah. But if you're a newsreader with Astro, where every time you got berita terkini and you're the front, and then you're a pretty lady with all the makeup and everything, when you smile without the front teeth, it looks pretty bad, isn't it? So that becomes a very material item that probably requires special disclosure. It's just an example. What I'm trying to say is that true and fair value is sometimes very troublesome for the auditor to sign, especially some particular situation that the amount is not small, it's not big, but the auditor feels they need to disclose. Now, certain items like director's fee, director's pay, even though very small, must be disclosed. Retirement benefit for directors, compensation, loss of office, loans and dealings, conflict of interest situation of directors under Akta Syarikat must be disclosed, no matter how small. Yeah. So this is to highlight that there are certain items that will sort of highlight to the shareholders, what kind of pay are we paying to the directors? The shareholder want to know, yeah, and also any of the fees or compensation or special consulting fees paid to Juro Audit must be disclosed in the financial statements separately, okay? No exception. 250, subsidiary to be included in the consolidated accounts. Many years ago, like Enron, if you saw the video, in the year 2000, Enron did not even have a consolidated balance sheet when they go for analyst briefing, in front of TV crew and TV station when they have a briefing. They don't even supply a consolidated balance sheet. So nowadays it's compulsory, it's wajib under the Reporting Act, Financial Reporting Act, under accounting standards, that there must be a consolidated group accounts being prepared to give you a whole overall picture of a company. I think in Japan, they still don't prepare consolidated accounts, in Japan. And some more the language in Japan is Japanese. So it's very, very difficult to analyze. I think in China, they are trying to improve their financial reporting standards to also make it compulsory for companies to report consolidated financial statements. Now, why is it important to have consolidated financial statements? Because you can hide a lot of liabilities to your anak syarikat and it's not disclosed at the holding company level. Okay, so the subsidiary may be hiding a lot of liabilities, but the holding company balance sheet become clean, right? If you look at the holding company's own balance sheet. However, if you require consolidated accounts, then all these sampah, rubbish will show up in the financial statements, in the consolidated group financial statements. That's why 250 insists that subsidiaries must be included in the consolidated accounts. Now, I mentioned this to you just now. Financial statement must be approved by the board, accompanied by a statutory declaration. You see this? Statutory declaration, okay? sumpah. Okay, the director should make a statement stating that the financial statement are in accordance to applicable approved accounting standards, to give a true and fair view on the financial statement by the syarikat, and to be signed by at least 2 pengarah. And in the case of one director by a private company, by that director lah. And this to be attached to the financial statements. What happens if the company don't do that? Kalau if you don't do that, you will kena, the company and every director be liable to a fine not exceeding, not, I think there's a typo there, not 500 ringgit, it's 500,000, add one more zero there, 500,000, or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year, or kedua-dua. Yeah, kedua-dua. Okay, so I told you just now, when at the annual general meeting, the financial statements are tabled to the shareholders. Okay, it is not approved by the shareholder, but the shareholder boleh tanya soalan, ask question, and tembak the pengarah for answers. Yeah, because from the audited accounts, they can see the performance, they can see the financials, so they will give a lot of bullets to the shareholder to ask question. Just like in the Auditor General, when he presents his report to Parliament, then the Parliament got bullets to shoot the Cabinet, and also the Prime Minister, and also the head of all the government departments about those scandals that the Auditor General discovered. Okay. So far, so good. Any questions to ask? So you may ask, what happened to the CFO? The CFO do fictitious account, huh? What happened if the CFO cooked the books? Not the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer is not a director. Okay, not a director. He cooked the books. What happens? Anybody knows? Okay, if the Chief Financial Officer cooked the books, means memaksakan penyata kewangan with fake accounting, and the director say they don't know, can the director say that CFO did it without permission, we didn't know about it? They claim that they are ignorant, can? Under Akta Syarikat 2016, all the directors must have due diligence, must conduct due diligence, all right? They must exercise professional judgment, okay? So the directors basically cannot say he does not know, because the Act says that they should act professionally, and all of them must have basic accounting knowledge. They must go and do themselves upgrade and go and study accounting. They should have basic accounting knowledge. Okay, so they cannot say I don't know and don't bother. They must bother and go and do the upgrade. The Companies Commission provide some training for directors on financial. Okay, there's called financial statements reading for non-financial professionals. Now, 252 says that apart from the signing the accounts, the director shall also prepare a director's report. Okay, apart from the financial statements, which the director will sign, the director should also prepare a director's report. What is in the laporan pengarah? Directors of the company shall prepare, sorry, there's a typo there, shall prepare director's report, and this report should be approved by the board and signed by at least 2 pengarah. And then this is attached to the penyata kewangan. The director's report, which is being published, should state the name of the person yang signed the report. Okay, so the name of the director will appear down there. All right. They will choose any one of the director to sign lah. Any director who fail to prepare director's report is liable to a fine not exceeding 500,000 ringgit atau penjara setahun atau kedua-dua. Okay. Now it is possible that the company and the officer prepared the director's report but didn't have the board's approval. And also don't have the director's signature. Maybe they fake it at the sign. In that case, that person will be fined not exceeding 20,000 ringgit. Okay, this is the content of the director's report. It contains the name of every director, the principal activities, matters set out in Schedule 5. If you look at your Akta Syarikat, you can turn to the last few pages. There's an item that need to be disclosed under this schedule in detail, quite detailed. Okay. It may also include business review. You can write about what's your view of the business prospect and so on. The report should be prepared as if it's a reference to the company, and subsidiary undertaking in consolidated financial statements. Okay. Now, what about banks? Some companies are also banks. Now, if a company is also a bank, they will need to follow Bank Negara requirement as well as Companies Act. So, the form of content of the director's report and financial statement, apart from complying with Akta Syarikat, should also comply with the Financial Services Act. Financial Services Act is not in there, you can add that in, right? So Financial Services Act, this is for banks, banking corporation. Okay, 255, relief from requirements as to form and content of financial statements and director's report. Sometimes there may be a good reason for you to have a different form and content of financial statements and director's report. So the director may apply from the Companies Commission for an order not to prepare financial statement and director's reports. However, the order should be consistent to approved accounting standards. The order will not be granted unless the financial statements or report may be misleading, or inappropriate. Okay. Power of registrar to require, this 256. Power of registrar to require a statement of valuation of assets. On complaint by some shareholders, the registrar of companies, CCM, may demand from the company a statement of valuation of current value of assets and liabilities within the time specified in the notice. The time period may be extended upon application if deemed appropriate. Now, how come some companies got, what do you call that, they don't revalue their assets? How come? Why 256 point this out on valuation of assets? Now, you heard of the term called old money, OLD, old money. Many orang kaya is from the old generation where they use a company to buy a lot of land. Okay, some examples of companies that may become very wealthy today: Oriental Holdings, you have United Engineers, yeah. You have companies like Sime Darby, yeah, YTL. So all these sharikat have bought plantation assets or land bank many, many years ago when those land and assets are very, very cheap. For example, like even Genting, for example, plantation, they bought land that's only about 10 cents or 20 cents per square feet those days. Now it can be sold for 20, 30 ringgit, yeah. So obviously there are a lot of companies out there that are like that, where they have bought land and is parked under the company. Now, those companies I mentioned are listed companies. So, because as listed companies at the annual general meeting, people, shareholders can voice out and ask the company to revalue those assets to better reflect the value of the companies. Yeah. But what if that company is a Sindran Berhad? All right. Sindran Berhad, for example, Wong Alfat, Sindran Berhad. Now, if somebody have a look at the Penyata Kewangan or Wong Alfat Sindran Berhad, they discovered that this company holds 10,000 acres or hectares of land near Port Klang, right? Or near to, what do you call that, near to these valuable land banks, where would be a good place? In Subang Jaya, for example. So this land will be worth a lot of money now. Per square feet, I think 300, 400, 500 ringgit, yeah. Now, if this Sindran Berhad have, say, 10,000 acres of land in those places, but because of the way accounting standards work, this land may not have been revalued for maybe 50, 60 years. So in the books, it's still stated at the net book value, which is the price that they bought it at that time. It's called net book value. So because there's no requirement to revalue the assets, therefore the assets will sit in the books at this price, at this value, 1 ringgit per square feet. So what will happen at 1 ringgit is that other shareholders, because in companies is not necessarily that the management will also be the owner. The owner is separate from the shareholders. The owner is separate from the shareholders. So very often the guy that's in charge, the CEO, may have a conflict of interest, where he does not act in the best interest of the shareholders. So the shareholders may agree, because the shareholders have no right to go to the company to demand to look at the books, because in the Akta Syarikat, there's a segregation of ownership and ownership and management. So how does management come about is that a director is appointed, so major shareholder may appoint the directors and the board will run the company. So how does a shareholder get involved? He has to appoint himself as a director first before he can get involved in the management of the company. So many of the smaller shareholders may be aggrieved, like if this guy holds 51%, he can appoint himself as the director and CEO. The other 49%, because they don't have enough shares to vote themselves in, they may be prevented from managing the company or appointing themselves as directors. Yeah. So these smaller shareholders may have no avenue to complain, because the major holder, who's also a director, may try to strip out these assets quietly, take it out at a cheap price. So this group of aggrieved shareholders, the minority shareholders, may complain to the registrar of companies or the CCM to ask them to direct the management of the company to revalue the assets. This is to protect the interests of the minority shareholders. So there are many cases of private companies that are very kaya because they bought assets long time ago at very low prices, and those assets are not being revalued after all these years. Any questions so far? Okay, 257. Duty to circulate copies of financial statement or reports. So for each financial year, the financial statements and reports should be sent to every member of the company, and every person who is entitled to receive a notice of the general meeting, and every auditor of the company should also get a copy of the financial statements, and every debenture holder also, upon request, should get a copy of the financial statements. If the copies have not been sent or are been requested by the member or debenture holder, it should be given to them without charge. If the company do not follow this, the company or the officer is liable to the fine not exceeding 50,000 ringgit. Okay, 50,000 ringgit. What's the time allowed for sending out the financial statement and reports? For private company, within 6 months of the financial year. For public company, it should be 21 days before the date of the annual general meeting. Okay, so for public company, they are given more time to send out the financial statements. If this has not been done, the company and officer liable to a fine not exceeding 50,000, and if continuing offence, a further fine not exceeding 500 ringgit for each day. Okay. There's also a duty to lodge financial statements and report with the registrar. If you don't do that, okay, there's private company, public company. On conviction, there's a 50,000 fine. Every day you don't do it, you can 1,000 each day. But I think there's no jail sentence. Duty to lodge certificate in relation to exempt private company. You can apply for your company to be an exempt private company. You have to apply to the CCM and then they'll give you a certificate. Okay. So the convenience is with the exempt private company, you don't have to lodge accounts with the registrar companies. Auditor statement. Those companies that are under exempt proprietary, they need to get an auditor statement to be signed. Okay, subdivision 2 on auditors. Any questions so far? From any of you students? Quite boring, right? This is how companies act as right law, no choice. This is the law, the law. Any questions so far on these sections on financial statements? No question. Have you all? I hope you all have done the spreadsheet and keen at least the act. Then afterwards you can fill it up virtually. This is worth 20 marks, so it's quite a lot. That will help you in your in your cost assessment. Any questions so far? You don't have to do it in this format that I've just put in. You can do your own style, essay style. There's no hard and fast rule on this one. But I find that if you do it in tables, it's easier, more systematic to do it this way. Okay. Any questions? All can hear me well, Audio is okay?
Yes.
Okay. Now we take I think you're already done. I take a 20-minute break. All right, because the next section is about auditors. We take a 20-minute break, go for your coffee break and whatever. You'll come back after 20 minutes and we will continue with the auditors. So this quiz is not difficult. There's you have to do a lot of keying in. So I think you can do about 13, 14 pages. It'll be good, right? Something substantial to submit okay? Once we finish the auditor section, then we will discuss the different type of auditors. Actually, we already discussed that last week. It's also part of this assignment, where you can fill up the type of auditors. And then we'll finish off with how do you audit fixed assets? Because fixed asset is an important part, of a company's balance sheet. Remember just now, Akta Syarikat also require they can actually demand that the company revalue its assets. So asset is actually an important part of a company, usually, because they may own property, they may own land bank, they may own some even bigger companies like aeroplanes, jet planes, and the shipping companies, the assets will be ships and so on. So fixed asset is quite a big item that you should know. And okay, we will take a break, 20-minute break, then we'll come back to continue with Juro Audit, the section on Juro Audit, Companies Act. Okay, will do. I'll see you in about 20 minutes time.